Listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar. Today we will be discussing the future and conditional tenses in Spanish. My name is Dan, and my colleague Zach is here to answer questions you may have throughout the webinar. Please send any in at any time. If you need to contact us, here are some options on your slide. We're here every day, Monday through Friday, 9 to 6 Eastern, to answer your questions to help you get through your program. If you do have questions throughout the webinar, on the slide now you will see the area on your screen where you can do so. In today's webinar, we will discuss the uses, the translations, and the types of verbs of both tenses, future and conditional. So let's begin by discussing the use and translation of the future tense. One note to be mindful of at the bottom of the screen is that you may be familiar with the phrase ir plus a plus an infinitive verb. It's a basic introductory way to refer to a future action, but it's not exactly the same as the future tense itself. Rather, it is used to describe something that is going to happen, being that the verb ir means to go, as opposed to what will happen, which is expressed using the future tense. So as you can see at the top of the slide, the word will and will not in negative context is exactly how the future tense should translate. Okay, so when conjugating or writing out the Spanish future tense, there's no additional word needed to express will. Rather, that will, when it translates, it's built into the conjugation, into the Spanish word. Unlike in English, where it is needed, right, in Spanish, there is no need to express the word will. It is simply part of the conjugated verb. So in Spanish, one conjugated verb, and you'll see a few examples of that coming up, as opposed to in English where two words make up that future conjugation, as you can see in the examples there, will help and will work. In Spanish, those two words will be one, and there's no need to express the will as previously stated. Okay, quick discussion on the conditional before we dive deeper into both tenses. This tense is one that is used to express an action that would happen due to or under certain circumstances or conditions. So think of those conditions. I would do this if. Typically there's a reason why somebody would or would not do something. Hence the conditional tense and its translation. So future uses will, conditional uses the word would. And just like in the future tense, there is no need for an additional word to express the actual word for would. Again, it would is built into the conjugation itself. So in English, two words, as you see in the examples, would help or would work. In Spanish, however, just the one word conjugation is required. No additional word necessary. And again, just like with the future, you will see some examples of that coming up here in the next few slides. Now we will discuss regular verb conjugations for both tenses. These are the only two simple tenses whose regular conjugations don't require dropping the infinitive ending, the AR, the ER, or the IR. And in this case, you're simply attaching either the future, in this case, or eventually the conditional endings. In this case, you can see the future endings on the chart below. You're going to attach them directly to the infinitive. So if you can think back to something like present tense or preterite, other tenses you may have studied or, seen on webinars or in your course material, in the present tense, you're going to drop that infinitive ending first, the AR, the IR, the IR, and then add a new ending. But in this case, or in these cases, both future and conditional, the verb remains in the infinitive form. The AR, the ER, or the IR stay attached. And then for now, for future tense, you take those endings, a, as, a, amos, or an, and simply attach them to the infinitive without removing anything. All right, these endings are used for all future tense verbs, regular and otherwise, which we'll talk about later. And if you notice, they do have accent marks on all persons except for first person plural. Okay, so that chart down below is very good to be mindful of, and we'll come across the conditional verb endings here shortly. All right, on this slide, you see a few examples of regular future tense conjugations. The verb hablar, to speak. So it says, I will speak to my friends. The verb comprar, to buy. She will buy a gift. And the verb ganar, to win. You will win a prize. If you notice, all of those verbs, they're all AR verbs, but they all have the AR still attached. So the future endings that we saw on the chart on the previous slide have been attached to the infinitive, and therefore the future conjugations come about that way. As we move forward, we'll start to discuss regular verbs in the conditional tense. Again, remember, conditional is used to express something that would be done. And again, another reminder, just like future, the infinitive ending stays attached. And then you simply add these new endings in the chart below to that infinitive to form a conditional regular conjugation. If you notice, all the endings are very similar in this tense, all beginning with I, and each of them has an accent on the I, every single person. So again, just to review future and conditional, the only two tenses that keep the infinitive ending and have a new ending attached to that infinitive. A little bit unusual, but they do share that in common. And here you see some examples of regular conditional tense conjugations. Okay, again, you see the infinitive AR in the first and third example, and you see the infinitive ending IR in the second and the middle example. They stay attached to the stem, and then we simply add the conditional endings we saw on the previous slide to that full verb to form the conditional tense. So those three examples, yo no gritaría a mis padres, I would not shout or yell at my parents. Second one says, we would share our foods. And the last one says, they would not listen to me. Okay. As we move forward, we will discuss the irregular verbs within these two tenses. And there is a total of 12. And these irregular 12 are shared among the two tenses, meaning the future and conditional have the same exact irregular verbs. The difference is that the endings, will be applied for each respective tense. And you'll see a representation of that as we move on to the next couple of slides. All right, these verbs are considered to be irregular stem verbs. That means all of the letters that come before the AR, the ER, or the IR ending have something unusual about them. They are irregular in terms of their spelling. Okay, and we'll take a look at those now. All right, on this slide, you see all of the irregular verbs that the future and the conditional share. Again, remember, if you're taking notes or if you're using this at a later time, all right, this list applies to both tenses. So future uses these irregular stems in the middle column, as does conditional. So just to show you, a little bit about that, if you take a look at the verb caber, which means to fit, its normal or regular stem would be CAB, everything before the ER infinitive ending. However, to properly conjugate to future or conditional, it is irregular in its stem. And you can tell there's an R that's added to that stem. No rhyme or reason, simply has to be memorized. Really no trends to follow as you go down this whole list. All right, just something to be mindful of and something that must be studied and applied when applicable. Okay, and just to review, both tenses are going to use that one set of respective endings that we saw on the charts on the previous slides. So if you were to say something like, I will tell the truth, you would take the irregular stem of decir, which is dir, pronounced dear. If you're talking future tense, first singular's ending was an E with an accent, so I will tell the truth, yo diré. However, to switch from future to conditional, the ending must change. And the ending now starts with an I, if you remember back to the previous chart. So to say I would say or I would tell, diría, D-I-R-I-A, with an accent on that I. Okay, so same general lists, same shared verbs, but different endings, all right, among the two tenses, clearly. Okay, on this slide, just a few examples of irregular verbs in the future tense. Poner, normally the stem is pon, but in this case, for future and conditional, the dr is added to that. So the sentence at the top says, I will put the food or the meal on the table. Second verb is tener, to have. Normally its stem is just ten, but again, the dr comes into play here. So that sentence translates as Juan and Maria will have to leave at 8. And finally, the verb venir, which means to come. Normally its stem is ven, but again, just coincidentally, the dr is added. Not all of the 12 irregulars share that similarity, as you saw in the previous slide. And that final sentence translates Roberto or Robert will come to the party. And on this side, a couple of examples using irregular verbs in the conditional. First verb is valer, to be worth or to value. Again, just happens to be one that has that dr, similar spelling like the previous three on the last slide. And that sentence translates as the house would be worth a lot. Decir is the second verb, which is the one I mentioned earlier as we were talking about the irregular list. dir is its irregular stem, quite unusual, quite different compared to the normal stem of dec. And that translates as I would always tell the truth. And the last verb you see there in a negative context is hacer, to do or to make. Normally hacer's stem is hac, in this case har, irregular. And that sentence translates as Felipe and I wouldn't do the homework. And to wrap up today's webinar, just a couple of reminders. All right, to describe something that will happen, use the future tense. To describe something that would happen, use the conditional. And as we've spent the last few minutes discussing, both tenses share the same irregular verbs. There's a total of 12, and all verbs, regular and irregular, take each respective set of endings among the two tenses. Okay, that concludes today's webinar. We thank you for your attention. If you do have any questions, please feel free to send them in at this time. Good luck in your program, in your course. If you do have any questions for us, there are many ways to reach us. We're here to help you, so please don't hesitate. Let us know how we can help. Buena suerte.